room, photos may be taken from your seats, but once the press conference begins, only the 6 accredited photo agencies will be allowed to take photographs. If you are staying for the next press conference, please remain in your seat, and volunteers will rescan your passes. TIFF will make photos available from this press conference on the media site within 24 hours. Our volunteers with microphones will be moving around the room to handle questions, so when you ask your question, please remember to identify yourself and your media outlet. Everyone, please make sure your cell phones are turned off, and this press conference will be streamed live at tiff.net. Our moderator for this session is Tom Powers, and it is now my pleasure to welcome the director and those featured in the documentary West of Memphis. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. We have Peter Jackson joining us from New Zealand by Skype. It's 2:30 a.m., I believe, where Peter is, so we're very grateful to have him here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by asking each person a question here, and then I'm going to go to the audience for questions. I do want to remind you that we're here to talk about West of Memphis, so I'm not going to take any questions that don't relate to West of Memphis. Let me start with Peter. Peter, can you tell us how you got involved with this case and what that process has been like ever since then?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you sort of okay, but we'll...
All right. Well, Fran Walsh and I watched the original Paradise Lost documentary on television down here in New Zealand about 2005. And it seemed as if there was a major miscarriage of justice going on. We hadn't heard of the case before that. So we Googled it, thinking that Damien, Jason and Jesse would have been released by now, because this was 11 years after the original trial. And we were obviously shocked to find that they were still in jail and that nothing had really advanced with the case. So we offered to give some financial assistance just to make a donation. But eventually, Laurie Davis, Damien's wife, became a very good friend of ours, and Fran in particular. And Anna Laurie both got heavily involved in investigative work, and we were funding DNA tests. And we sort of thought that the best thing to do would be to be funding forensic and scientific tests that the defence never had the resources to do back at the original trial. And it seemed to us that there was a whole lot of science that could be gotten into in this case with the right resources, and so that's really where we helped. And towards the end of 2008, I think it was, the charming and moral Judge Burnett, the original judge, had he had denied all the new evidence that we'd uncovered with the DNA and the forensics and the scientific evidence, and so we thought that the state was going to try to suppress this as long as they possibly could, and at that point we contacted Amy Berg with the idea of doing a documentary, because we thought a documentary film would be the perfect forum to get the evidence out that the courts were denying be heard down in Arkansas.
Let me turn to Amy now. Amy, when you went down to West Memphis to begin the process of making this film, describe for me where the case was at and what the reactions were in the community to the case.
Well, when I first went down, the two major developments were the DNA that was discovered that was identified to be Terry Hobbs, and the animal predation. All of the forensic experts that had consistently said that all the wounds on the bodies were post-mortem wounds, which actually changed the scope of the whole case. And so that's where things were at. However, I feel like at that time there still wasn't a real movement towards, people still weren't believing that they were innocent on the whole. There was still this kind of hater community there, and that I watched that change dramatically over the next 3 years.
Damien, it's wonderful to have you out of prison now, but the verdict that you had to accept is a very compromised one, and I'd like to hear, where you're at now a year after being out of prison.
Well, we're out of prison physically, but having to take this deal has a lot of ramifications and reaches into a lot of areas of our lives that make sure that we're still not completely free. You know, we had to go through hell just to, you know, come here for the film festival today, because the U.S. still shows that I have 3 counts of murder on my criminal record. So I have to go through, you know, all of these extraordinary measures that the average person wouldn't have to. So even now, even though I'm out, this case still has a huge impact on my life.
Lori, can you describe for me, at this point now, what's the way forward on this? The case isn't over, really, in the way that Damien is describing. So what's the point of focus now?
Continuing the investigation in the case, which we are doing, and also to bring focus on what has happened in Arkansas and educate people throughout the world to bring pressure down on the state of Arkansas to reopen the case and bring the killer to justice and to exonerate these 3.
Johnny, you've been an advocate for this case for a long time. What is it about this case that drew your attention?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, the obvious grave injustice. Certainly, I mean, you know, after such a heinous and vicious, brutal attack on 3 innocent little boys, and I think more than likely, you know, in terms of the investigation was, you know, let's get whatever we can define as the predator off the streets to calm this community down. And so it became a witch hunt, I think. And it was clear from the first second that I saw the Paradise Lost film, which is when I called Lori. I just knew that this was a horrific lie, and that these boys were innocent. So I wanted to help in any way I could.
Damien, one follow-up question. With the new film coming out, the film is going to open on December 25th, Christmas Day. What do you hope that a new film, this film will do?
Well, one of the reasons that Lori and I were so happy to be part of this is because it was, you know, there's been a lot of other documentaries and books and TV shows and magazine articles and everything else about the case. But this was the very first time that we ever got to take part in telling our own story and being part of that. So, I mean, that's a very, in a way, as painful as it is, it's also a very rewarding process that we were able to finally talk about the things that we were going through during this case. So, I mean, I hope to get that out, and again, like Lori said, just keep the attention on the state of Arkansas so that eventually they have to do what's right, so that they realize this isn't just going to go away just because they force this plea on us, that we're going to keep going until we're completely exonerated.
Okay, let's take some questions from the audience. If you raise your hand, I will call on you and bring you a microphone. Bruce Kirkland right here.
Hi, good morning. Bruce Kirkland from the Toronto Sun. Question for Johnny and Deb.
Yes,
I'm curious, because you're obviously involved in a lot of fiction films, that's your career, but here we have a documentary form, and I'm curious, and Tom knows I'm obsessed with this idea, the power of a film documentary to tell a story and to actually change society in a fundamental way. Clearly you must buy into that or you wouldn't be involved in this kind of project. Could you speak to that issue and the power of cinema to make a difference?
Well, obviously the power of cinema, the power of the media, the power, you know, I mean, that all those things go, in, you know, I mean, to some degree, hand in hand. What I think is most important right now is that it's the first time that Lori and Damien, through Fran and Peter, were able to tell their side of the story, as opposed to, I mean, the Paradise Lost film certainly made, put a spark out there, most definitely, and they were, it brought attention to the case. But this particular film, I think, leads to a more, it's less safe in a way, because it's you're basically introduced to the real perpetrator. And I think it's pretty obvious to everyone who sees the film. I think it's been obvious to us for many years now. So, and so obviously, the great power of the documentary, the great power of getting that, getting the voice out there. There's nothing as powerful. And something like this, I mean, this is the road to total exoneration, and that's what needs to be. Thanks.
Okay, I think we have another question right here.
Hello, Juan Carlos Garcia from Mexico City. This question is for Peter and Johnny. You both are opinion leaders and celebrities. Do you think there is a responsibility as a social persons, like to give opinions about these kind of cases, or something that needs attention in the whole world?
Peter, maybe we can hear from you first. Did you hear that question?
Yeah, it is. Well, it's interesting because our involvement really is born of friendship. It's not born of any sense of responsibility. I mean, we come from New Zealand. We don't really have anything to do with the American justice system. Never been to Arkansas in my life. Probably never will now, actually. But, this was a friendship that Laurie and Fran and I formed, and it became very, very important to us, just on a human level, to try to get Damien and the other guys out of jail and try to help with bringing justice to the case, because it's not just about the exoneration, it's about finding who killed these little boys, and it's something that Arkansas doesn't seem to be particularly interested in. The political justice system in Arkansas doesn't have any desire to bring justice to this case and to the families of the two little boys that were killed. It's pretty outrageous.
Johnny, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, but I'm sorry, but the question was. I don't, myself, to be honest, the idea, I'm essentially a gas station attendant with a very strange job. I ended up with a strange job, which put me in a position to, that claimed anonymity and stuff like that. I'm basically, I don't think of myself as a celebrity, so I'm here, as Peter said, really as a friend. If there are people out there who will take a minute to listen to what I have to say, or certainly to what these guys have to say, I think they'll learn a lot more about this case. And as I said, I'm here to support my friends and to attain what the proper definition of justice for all, for the victims, families, for Damien and the other boys, for sure. I'm here as a friend.
Okay, we have a question over here, this woman.
Hi, Karen Bliss from RollingStone.com, and I also have a magazine, sort of my anti-tabloid, called SamaritanMag.com, where we write original stories about causes that people support. So this is for Damien. I remember, I think the first time I heard of your case, I think it was on American Justice, and I've seen other cases where the show ends and I'm like, wow, I got to do something, like this is wrong, but it's so overwhelming. I don't have money, I don't have power, I don't have connections. Like, what can we do?
I think actually Laurie would probably be better to answer that than me. What specifically can they do in a concrete way that would help right now?
I think, first of all, see our film, because there's a lot of information in west of Memphis. It's basically the investigation that was leading up to what we would have put on in a hearing that was actually scheduled to happen before Damien was released. So I think the most important thing is to educate yourself about the case and about the justice system, because if we don't, as a culture and as a country, understand what's happening, then this is going to happen over and over again.
Damien, I want to ask you a question. You're here with us in person today, but you spent around 17 years in prison. During 18 years, Amy corrects me, during that time as you'd make different efforts, and as things would get shot down. Can you talk about keeping your own hope alive?
Well, a lot of it, the way you survive in there is not thinking about it to a great degree. You have to create some sort of structured environment for yourself. You know, I would spend, by the time I got out, I had worked up to doing anywhere from 5 to 7 hours of meditation a day. So that, and my relationship with Lori, a lot of reading and studying, that's what would keep me from thinking about the case a lot of times. And I think that's what I had to do, is not think about the case. But by the time that I got out, I had really started to get scared because I was reaching a point where I couldn't even remember what it was like to be out anymore. You know, I went in when I was 18 years old, and I spent 18 years in. And for the first few years, it's like you try to feed yourself with memories. You try to survive. You try to live on just what you already knew, the experiences you already had. And it gets to a point when I literally had spent half my life in this concrete box, and I couldn't remember the simplest things anymore. You know, like I knew that at one time pizza had been my favorite food, but I could no longer even remember what it tasted like. So in a way, you have to let go of those kind of things, or it'll drive you insane, and you have to focus on whatever you do have.
I should add, this film comes out on December 25th, but you have a book coming out also. We should mention that.
It comes out on September 18th. It's called Life After Death. It's going to be published in the U.S., Canada, a few other countries have already started to translate it. But the release date for North America is September 18th.
I just want to add something. We were talking earlier about the issues that we faced in the past 48 hours to get Damien a visa into this country. And I think it's really important that we remember that the deal that they took offered them no financial compensation. And had they not taken that deal, they would each have been entitled to $18 million. That's the going rate for a wrongful conviction, is $1 million a year. So it's so important for Damien to be able to tour and speak about his case and his book and his life, because he has no other way to earn a living. And I just think it's important to remember that.
If it wasn't for Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh and Johnny, really we would have had nowhere to go and nothing to do whenever I got out. We were essentially homeless. We left Arkansas like refugees, just running. And if it wasn't for people like Peter and Johnny catching us, being our safety net, helping us, you know, it's not like they just stopped whenever we got out of prison. They were there to catch us the day we got out, and they've helped us adapt and keep moving forward. But if it wasn't for them, we would have absolutely nothing. Not a change of clothes, not a place to sleep, nothing.
We have a question here, this woman.
Going back to the book itself, I'd like to ask Johnny Depp if he would agree to answer a question in French. Would that be okay?
If you
Easy question.
you can speak the French, and I'll
Okay.
I'll
the question is
speak
about
the
the
English.
adaptation of the memoir, right? You declared interest in adapting the book from Damien. Do you think you still have, you know, there's another film that needs to be done after this one?
Yeah, I think that there's, I mean, you know, it depends, you know, on the, you know, cinema. It's very strange today. Peter will probably agree. Cinema today has gone so, it's gotten smaller in a sense, Hollywood cinema. And at the same time, the boundaries of television have grown. You can get away with a lot more, or you can there's a lot more information that you can send out there on, say, I don't know, you know, some sort of a mini-series type deal. I think it's important to tell Damien's story from his perspective. I mean, from the perspective of his book, his words, and I think you know, people will learn a lot more. It will be again another sort of layer of that education that is needed to really understand how complicated and ugly this thing has been for you know, 18, 19 years, 20 years, whatever.
Okay, we have a question over here, and then we're going to get this gentleman in the front row here, right here. Can please identify yourself?
Charles Thorpe, Us Weekly Magazine. Actually, I had the similar question, but I guess I'd ask Damien a follow-up. Do you support, you know, future films being made on this, and will you be championing this until that you're exonerated and supporting that?
I support anything that's accurate and truthful and that helps to get the word out. Yes.
Okay, question right here in the front row.
Hi, Simon Haupt with the Globe and Mail. This question is for Damien and Laurie. You both said, actually certainly this morning, you just said, Damien, that one of the reasons you wanted to participate is because you felt your side of the story had not gotten out there sufficiently. Obviously, you're in Paradise Lost 3 to a great extent. I'm curious to know, not necessarily pointing to those films, but in general, do you resent in some way the way you had been portrayed? And if so, can you point to particular examples?
I don't know if resent is the right word, but I do have a lot of mixed feelings about some of it just because, you don't have any control over it. People can take your image and they can make you look any way they want you to look. And it's not always a good feeling. It may not come across as a negative thing to the rest of the world, but there are times, well, just like in the last Paradise Lost film, that was one of the most stressful time periods of our life, and Laurie and I both looked like hell in those movies because we were we were crumbling, we were cracking, we were breaking inside, we were reaching the very end of our ropes. And it's not fun to have the world see you at your lowest point. So it's resentment isn't the right word, but I do have mixed feelings about it. And in this case, it's just that we get to participate in it a little more. We get to finally present whatever it is that we want to present. And even, with the book also, you get to go into a lot of detail that you can't go into it with a movie. This movie, West of Memphis, is about 2.5 hours long, but that's still a very short amount of time to try to pack all of this information into and try to express a lot of things. So with the book, I tried to focus on things outside of the case. The movie is more about the case. It does cover, some things like our relationship with my relationship with Laurie, but with something like the book, you can go more in depth and detail with things like that. That's what matters to me. The case is, to be honest, it's wore me down and wore me out, and I'm sick to death of it. It's the other things that I want a chance to finally be able to express and talk about, like my relationship with Laurie or relationship with Johnny. Those things, the things that matter in my life, that's what I want to be able to finally express and show to people instead of just with some of the other things, like the previous documentaries and previous TV shows, it feels like I was seen by the entire world as nothing more than a victim over and over and over. And I don't want to be seen that way, not for the rest of my life.
We have a question in the back.
Mohit Rajan, City TV. Johnny, you've been at the festival many times over the few years with various different projects. I wonder if you can give us a comment about your feeling about the Toronto International Film Festival and your relationship to the city and how you've seen it change and grow over the years.
Well, it's certainly grown. It's certainly grown, and it's a great arena with which to present whatever information you want to present. In terms of cinema, documentary, whatever. It's always been great for that. It's always had a very high level of prestige. It's a wonderful place, and I think I can think of no better forum at this time to release this particular film. It's a very strong film, and what Amy and Peter and Laurie and Damien have done is nothing short of miraculous. So it's very exciting for me to be here to support a film that is not, let's say, entertainment, I guess. I'm very pleased to be here to support these guys in this film.
Amy, let me ask you a filmmaking question. Damien talked about just how complicated a story this is. As you approach the story, spans 18 years, lots of new information is coming out during the time you're making it. What were the challenges for you to get a handle on telling this as a story?
The challenges were the case, really. There were so many victims in this story. all the way through, people that lied on the witness stand, that were holding on to this because they were, self-preservation was a big theme, obviously. And I don't mean to say that a person who lied on the witness stand is a victim, but there were people that had been holding on to information for years and needed to express what they had to say. And there were just a lot of different tangents. And as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, it's, you know, important to stay on point. And I just felt like there were so many different truths and so many different versions of reality that that was challenging for sure.
Okay, we have a question right here.
Hi, this question's for Peter. Rudy Blair, 680 News. First, I'm curious in how you guys got the footage because it's very graphic. And to anybody else on the panel, do you think that we have concluded who the real killer is?
Amy, maybe you can speak more to the footage because as the filmmaker.
Yeah, what footage are you referring to?
I don't want to go into too much detail because I think folks should see this, but the footage of the children, those kind of things, because it's, like I said, very graphic.
Well, first of all, when these guys were convicted, the case was closed, and that made everything on the public record. So there was a plethora of information to sift through, and numerous sources, numerous people have actually gone through this information and created websites. We spent plenty of time at the West Memphis Police Department going through documents. Fran and Pete have boxes and boxes of photos and reports. So, I mean, we shot everything, basically. You're talking about just the autopsy photos? And
Not just the autopsy, I mean, the pictures in the waterbed, those kind of pictures.
Yeah, there was somebody on the scene with a video camera from the police department. So that video exists right in the storage locker.
Peter, maybe I can ask you a version of this question. This film is done, but the case isn't done. This case that you've been supporting for so many years, the scientific investigation, et cetera. Where are you now with, what's your involvement now with this case?
Well, it's still day to day. In fact, this morning there was a plethora of emails about some more developments that have happened. I mean, we're continuing to work with Steve Braga, Damien's attorney. But just to talk about the movie for a second, I mean, Amy and I have often sort of talked about this being a work-in-progress film, and it's possible that it'll be permanently a work-in-progress film. I mean, depending on how the case develops, it's not impossible that we'll continue to update the film. When Amy came down to New Zealand to do the final editing on the movie in January, there was developments in the case, and she had to Amy was in the cutting room and organising a crew in Arkansas to go and interview the boys that you saw in the film that came forward with new information. So we were literally adding to the film just days before it was due to be finished. And in a way, the film isn't really finished yet. I don't regard it as being finished. Certainly the story is not finished. The case isn't finished. But it's political. This is just all about politics. I mean, the person in Arkansas that ultimately does the right thing, whoever that is, I don't know who that individual is, but it's going to be somebody who's doing it because it's good for their career. It's good, and so far people have done the negative. They've refused to confront justice because they've been fearful that it would be bad for their career. So if this film and the groundswell around the case can do anything, it's to persuade somebody in a position of power in Arkansas that it would be good for their career. They might get a few more votes if they actually do the right thing here, because so that really goes back to the public, to the voters in Arkansas, the people that need to actually make their opinions heard.
So we're going to have time for just a few more questions, but let me just pick up, Amy, on what Peter said. Thinking of this film as a work in progress, and maybe Damien, Laurie, you have something to add to this. If you could go out and ask another question or interview someone who didn't have access to before, what are the things that you would like to add to this film right now?
The person that I would like to interview again, actually, I interviewed him a few times, is John Fogelman, but of all the officials that I interviewed while I was making the film, he was the one person that I felt had he was struggling somewhere. I could see that in his eyes, and I feel like.
Can you just say who John Fogelman is?
Oh, sorry. He was the prosecuting attorney at the time, and he then ran for judge. And he would be somebody that I'd like to challenge a little bit more now that the film has had a few screenings, and we're going to be screening more locally. So that's somebody that I'd like to talk to more.
Damien, Lori, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think for me, it's not necessarily a person. It's, we found out that the FBI has about 200 more pages, documents on this case that no one has ever seen before. And Peter and Fran have both been engaged, trying everything they can to get the FBI to turn over these 200 pages of information in hopes that maybe there's something in there that we don't already know, or something that could give us more leads, something that could, steer us in a direction that would finally break the case open. So for me, it's not a person, it's those FBI files.
We have a question in the back there. Please identify yourself.
Hi, Bruce DeMera. I'm with the Toronto Star. What are the legal options after accepting an Alford plea? It seems they're limited, but I know in the States you can have federal civil rights charges, for example, instead of state murder charges. Are there legal, is the case closed from an investigative point of view? Is there a chance? Is there a way to perceive a path forward to actually getting the case reopened and having somebody else charged? And is that realistic? Is that a possibility?
Well, right now, we are actively working with the prosecutor, Scott Ellington, and I think the only way that this Alford plea actually goes away is if they do convict somebody else. And the state obviously has no interest in that, based on the fact that they're more concerned about the $60 million they would have to pay. Seems like that was the motivation for the deal for them. So I think that it's just more about continuing to push on those people. And it's election cycle right now. And a couple of the people that we interviewed in the film, Scott Ellington and Judge Burnett, are both running for re-election. So I think that this is an interesting window of opportunity to try to get some action going. So that's what we're trying to do with the film down there.
You talked about screenings in Arkansas. Has that happened yet, or can you talk more about what's going on there?
Yeah, we're actually beginning a series of screenings, free screenings to the public, all over Arkansas next week, and it's going to be going on through the election.
Good morning, Andrea Case, CTV News, Toronto. Damien, a question for you. We've had a number of wrongful convictions here in Canada, and when people get out, life is extremely difficult. You talked about the fact that you meditated for 5 to 7 hours a day. How do you keep yourself grounded now? And where do you see yourself 10, 20 years from now, when hopefully you can move on from this and have a life, because you've lost so much?
A lot of what I do to keep myself grounded now, it's still Lori. It is still meditation. And it's the people around us that have gathered to support us. Amy, Peter, Johnny, Eddie Vedder. We've been very fortunate in having, these sources of security and comfort and home around us that's made this transition easier. It's still not easy. It's incredibly, incredibly hard, more than I could ever even describe. Sometimes I think as time's going on, it even gets a little harder instead of a little easier, just because I was in such a deep state of shock and trauma whenever I first got out, and it's taken a while for that to start wearing off. What I would like to do maybe 20 years from now is I'd like to keep moving forward into the realm of art. Once people read things, once my writing is allowed to reach a wider audience through the book, I'm hoping that maybe people will like it enough that they will want to read what I write about something other than just the case. That would be my ultimate goal. But I'm also really interested in things like photography and performance art also.
Okay, we're going to take one more question in the back there.
Hi, Daryl Jordan Hicks, CHML. AM 900. My question is for Johnny Depp. As an actor, as an artist, how is your process different when you're going from a big budget Hollywood franchise like Pirates of the Caribbean, and then something like this, which has more of a documentary feel to it?
I mean, there was no, I mean, there's no real transition for me in that sense. I mean, playing characters and doing what I do for a job, I mean, it's, you know, it's, I mean, you know, I mean, it's the same as being a plumber and, you know, and going to support your local, you know, whatever, but, I mean, essentially, you know, we're talking about today and have been for many years, you know, human lives, you know, and these limitations that have been placed on these young men, you know, based on all the information we've just talked about, you know, the state of Arkansas and their unwillingness to reopen this thing. So I mean, when you're talking about, you know, if there is any transition, I mean, it's just, you know, you're not talking about some character that you played or, you know, some fictional, you know, movie. You're talking about real lives here, where many people have suffered. So the only, you know, it's more of a human situation here. It's infinitely more grave, obviously. You know, we want to lead these boys down the road to get them what they deserve, which is freedom. You know, like we all have.
Johnny, you spoke about your commitment to this being a commitment of friendship. When you got to know Damien originally, he was in prison. Can you talk about what it's been like to see him out of prison this last year, to get to know him outside of that realm?
It's been amazing, and there was aside from everything, aside from the case, aside from where Damien's been for the last 18 years, aside from where I've been for the last 18 years, there was an instant connection of there was some, I don't know, brotherly kind of love there that was instant. And having, you know, been in such, you know, close contact with Laurie over the last, I don't know how many, dozen years or something, to finally see Damien arrive at my house, you know, on my doorstep was, well, it was quite, you know, moving and you know, it was a celebration. I mean, it was just a celebration. It was beautiful, and it was the perfect. It was like the perfect situation. He and Laurie arrived at my house. We had tater tots and tacos, and then, you know, natural course of events took place, and we went straight to the tattoo parlor. So it's been, I mean, for me to see him out and Laurie, you know, back, has been the most profound gift, you know, to see these people out amongst, you know, in the world living, you know. And they're just, you know, they're wonderful people. They're wonderful friends, and yeah, I feel very lucky, you know, to have been involved on, you know, whatever tiny level I was involved on. You know.
So the film is going to screen today at the festival at 2:30, followed by a conversation on stage with these people. The film again opens on December 25th. I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to especially thank the group of people on stage for being here too.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.